Hi, everyone. I lost my voice this week, so bear with me. I'm going to croak through this lesson. Someone, in fact, it was our lunch chair, she sent me a song this morning, and it was called Nothing Else. Okay, and I really felt it went with our lesson on, how do you keep going as a leader? And in fact, this week I was interviewed by the Houston Woman magazine, and they did a story on us when we first started. And so now going into 20 years, they came back to do like a follow-up story. And so one of the questions they asked is, how do you keep going? And do you really have the same passion with leading Inspire Women like you did when you first began? And I think as leaders, it's very important for us to settle. So I wanted to share with you a lesson. It's a personal lesson of what God taught me. And I would say that I wake up every morning going into 20 years with the same passion I feel when I woke up the first time when we launched Inspire Women. And it's not because it's easy. And in fact, it's hard. But I think that one thing that's very important when she sent that song, Nothing Else, okay? And the lyrics of the song says to God, I am not here for the blessing, that I am here for you. Okay? And I think that that's one thing that God has always instilled in my heart, is that he left you the Holy Spirit so that he would walk with you forever, that you would never feel that you were out there by yourself. So when I take the hill, I'm not thinking, well, here I am with all my plans and all my strategy taking the hill. I think one of the things I settle ahead of time is, God, do you want this? That's the only question I need to settle. And it doesn't matter if I think you should want this. It doesn't matter if it's my plan. It's like, do you want this? And are you asking me to do it? Okay? I think that that is one of the keys that you're going to have to settle if you want to keep going as a leader. Because you have to know, why are you doing this? Okay? And what is it that God wants? Because once you settle that and you say, I am a bondservant of the Lord. Okay? I am here to serve his agenda. I am not here to criticize his plans. I'm not here to give him advice. I'm here to just ask him, is it now, Lord? And is this what you want to do? Okay? I think that one of the things as a leader, in those intense moments, in those crisis moments, that's not the time for you to wrestle with your calling. That needs to be settled way ahead of time. Okay? Because when you're in that intense moments, I find that leaders who keep going, they don't pour more fuel on the fire. Okay, when Jesus said that I'm going to Jerusalem and that's where I'm going to suffer and that's where I'm going to die, and Peter came in and Peter says, no, Lord, that's not going to happen to you. Okay, I think you've got to be very careful of earthly advice. Okay, and it's not because people are trying to talk you out of God's will. It's because they love you. They don't want you to be hurt. But the crazy thing is, okay, there are some callings in your life where God will lead you to go into a difficult journey. Okay, and no one can release you from God's will. They can't say to you, no, you shouldn't go to Jerusalem. And you know what Jesus said to him? He said, get thee behind me, Satan. Because Satan will use the people closest to you to try to talk you out of doing something difficult. And they think they're doing a good thing. But actually, they're being used as a pawn. And you've got to be able to step back and ask yourself, am I hearing from God? Is this godly counsel coming to me? Or is it someone who's trying to spare me the suffering of a journey? Okay, I think that if you could settle that in those intense moments, a leader doesn't pour more fuel on the fire. Okay, Jesus didn't go, oh my gosh, I'm going to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. It's not like that. It's like, this is the Father's will. And this path is going to include times of trials and tribulation. But I've already settled that. Okay? A leader has already settled the cost of leadership. So that at the time when you have to pay the cost, you don't start questioning, what is the cost and can I afford to pay this? I mean, that should already have been settled. Do you see that? Okay, that you have already decided that this path in following God is going to require sacrifice. And I have already settled that I will pay the sacrifice. I know in our family, when we started this journey, we told our sons, this is not mom going on this journey with God. And you guys always criticizing why mom's not around and all that. I said, if we go on this, we're going together. And if we go together, there will be times where I need you to figure out your own dinner. I'm going to need you to figure out whatever's not going right in this household because we're in this together. And I don't want to hear it. I don't want to be guilted into being split. You know, I don't want to hear you saying because you're doing that, you know, I'm not getting what I need. I said, because this is a sacrifice not only for me, but it's going to be a sacrifice for you too. And then if you're saying, I'm not willing to pay the sacrifice, then maybe it's not the right timing, okay? Let's wait till we're all going together. I remember my sons, they were in, I think they were in elementary school, and one of them forgot his lunch. And I said to him, hey, Robbie, why didn't you call me? I could have brought you lunch. And he said to me, Mom, he says, I think he was 11. He said, I'm 11 years old, and I should be able to remember my own lunch. And he said, so if I forget my lunch, I don't deserve to eat. And then he said, but I'm not going to call you away from what God is doing through you and what our family is doing in this city just because I was careless and forgot my lunch. You see, the kids, but you got to make them feel like this is our sacrifice together. I remember one time they asked me to go to reach the missionaries who wanted to quit. And there was political uprisings in that country. And they say they don't want to go home. And they said, none of the U.S. speakers will go because it might be too dangerous. So the missions director of my church called me. And she said, will you go? I want you to go and do like a week retreat with these missionaries because if they leave, then the gospel of Jesus Christ can't get to that country. And I remembered my son at that time, it was Thomas. Thomas was 4 years old. And we were trying to decide as a family that mom's going to go and, you know, it might be potentially dangerous. And then Robbie said, well, does that mean Mom might get arrested and then she won't come back? You know? And we don't know, in fact, because they were arresting people. So we said, we don't know what are the possibilities. And I remembered out of Thomas's mouth, okay, 4 years old, he says, Mom, if you don't go, people will not hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. And he says, and I don't want the blood of them to be on my head. Okay? I was out of the mouth of babes. But those are the things you have to settle ahead of time. When I thought that Inspire Women could benefit from me capturing my story in A Daughter's Destiny. Okay, so I wrote that story. I know, I mean, you see the uprisings going on in Hong Kong now. They have millions of people in the street. One of the things my mother told me at a very young age is do not have your face on anything. Don't have it on a billboard, don't have it on a flyer, don't have it in a newspaper, don't have it in the books. Because she said, because sometimes when you're in countries that are not friendly to the gospel, if you have your face anywhere and they go into this roundup campaign to round up all the people who may not be supporting some of the views of the government, you're the first to be targeted. You're on a target list. And not only do they come after you, but they will come after every member in the family. She says, my uncle, he was arrested. They came to the house in the middle of the night, took him away, because he said something that they didn't like. He was gone for 3 years. No one knew where he was. And when he came back, she said he was a different person. I think ingrained in my spirit is this fear to be too public, okay? So when God challenged me in leading Inspire Women, what I saw was you cannot have a silent leader. Right. You know, you can't be a leader and say, but don't put my face anywhere and to put my voice anywhere. So I thought I had to wrestle with this deep-seated ingraining from my mother's teaching to be private and to be out of the limelight, to stepping out and saying, are you willing to do this? As Inspire gets more and more well-known, you know, the crazy thing is you're going to have people in the audience who may be a little unstable. It comes with the territory, you know, and you can keep people out. You can't say only the safe people can come here. Because a lot of times the people who are unstable are the ones who greatly need the gospel. Yes. Okay, so someone said to me, well, how do you protect yourself? And are you scared? And I'm like, no, I'm not scared, because it'd be stupid to be scared. Right. Because I said, my books are being circulated in the prison. My face is on the book. Amen. Okay? When someone comes out of prison, if that person is a crazy person, they know my face, they know how to get to me. If I start getting scared about the cost of leadership, then I'll never lead, because everywhere I go, you know, I think you've got to have the mindset, don't intensify the situation by your own alarm. Okay, you have got to already have settled your calling, and you have got to have already settled the cost of leadership. Okay, I'm going to give you a couple of other practical examples. I think you need to be in tune with your own leadership style. Okay, I believe that God matches the right leadership style with the mission. So if you don't understand the mission, you may not understand, why is my leadership style the right one for this? Okay, look at the Apostle Paul. He, before he became a Christian, was a very driven personality, right? He was a go, 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 a very goal-oriented. He was going to go out, he was going to persecute the Christians. He did not waste time worrying about what is the implication on their families. He's not thinking about that. He's like, this is the right thing to do, this is what I'm going to do. When he became a believer and God told him to be his chosen instrument to the Gentiles, that's what he did. He went and planted churches. Okay, when he planted the church and they got them a little stabilized, what did he do? He left. He went to plant another church. He went to plant another church. He didn't get so entangled in his relationships with people in one church that he didn't go. Okay, because he's about the task. He's about planting the churches. He's not about, oh wow, we've got all this family thing going on here, so I'm not going to leave. Okay, he wasn't like that, because that was his calling. Look at how he dealt with his relationships. When Barnabas went against him, okay, he didn't think, wow, Barnabas, this is the guy who introduced me. Okay, he lent me his platform. He lent me his influence, all right? He was the one who nursed me back to health when someone threw a rock in my head and left me to die. He was with me in all the first beginnings. He was there. And yet when there was a disagreement, I did not see Paul trying to hold on to Barnabas, right? He let Barnabas go. And then he went on with Silas, and God's word tells us, and the church prospered. Okay, so what's that all about? Now, some of you may say, well, that was so mean of Paul. You know, why didn't he try to keep Barnabas? I actually think that is his leadership style. His goal was to go and plant churches. Okay, if you help me in my goal, you are useful to me in the ministry. If you're going to argue with me, then you're more emotional stress and you're draining me, so you need to go. Okay, when he called for Mark, okay, what were his words? He says, send me Mark because he is useful to me in my ministry. Okay, he did not say, oh, send me Mark because we are so bonded. Okay, send me Mark because he gets me. Send me Mark because he meets an emotional need. It's not that. It's not about you filling my need. It's not about we being besties. It's about, this is the mission. Okay, are you sold out to the mission? Because if you're not sold out to the mission, I need you off the team. Because why don't you get sold out about something else? but you cannot be part of what I'm doing here, and you're always challenging the mission, okay? That was his leadership style. Okay, so I think that if you are a Paul-like personality, you need to know that if you are task-oriented, the most important for you to settle is, what is the task? Because if you don't know what the task is, you can't be task-oriented. It's like, where are we going with this? Okay, you've got to settle what is the task. Now look at Moses. Completely different personality, right? When I look at Moses, I see him to be he was very idealistic, very passionate, but also a little bit turbulent. Because in his idealism, he doesn't always think things through, right? So after you killed the Egyptian who oppressed your Hebrew brother, what are you going to do after that? Okay, he didn't think. Now, I don't see Paul acting and not connecting the dots, okay? But I see Moses doing stuff like that. I see Moses being a little timid. He was afraid to go to Pharaoh, and God then said, I'll give you Aaron to go do it, okay? He was more relational, okay? And he needed encouragement. Now, Moses' personality was perfect for the mission God sent him on. Because can you imagine if you're not relational, if you were leading millions of people to the promised land, and these people are complaining all the time, okay? What do you think Paul would have done with those same people? Do you see that? Do you see the mismatch? Okay? He wouldn't have put up with this, okay? Whereas Moses he was pleading mercy for the people, okay? Because he's very relational. But if you're a Moses type, you need to know, you need to surround yourself with people who are in a supportive role, so that it gives you the courage to keep going. And you need safe people around you. You also need people around you who can help you connect the dots. Because sometimes in your idealism, you don't think through all the steps that can lead you to the end goal. So it helps you to surround yourself with people who are much more organized, if you will, or who will ask you the question, well, how will we do that? Or if we do this, are we not doing these other 3 things we're already doing? So that they are like your check and balances. So I think it's important to know what your leadership style is. Tati asked me a really good question. So she said, but if you are a Paul personality, right, what happens if God puts you in a context where the leadership style doesn't quite work with that context? Do you then say, okay, I'm in the wrong mission? Or what do you say? Well, this is what I saw in Paul's life, that God used him in a very goal-oriented role when he was out there planting the churches, okay? But then God also allowed him to be in prison. Now think about that. How do you, as a goal-oriented, task-oriented person, survive when you are now confined in this area where the doors are not open here? You're literally chained to another guard. So I actually see what happens is, this is how I see it, is you are going to have a leadership style, but you don't get to worship your leadership style. You see the difference? You don't get to say, well, this is how I am. Because you see, you don't get to be how you are. You get to be the bondservant of the Lord. And you let the Lord use how you are when it matches the mission. But when he puts you in a context where this style doesn't quite fit, you're going to have to adjust, okay? And your adjusting is your way to bow your knee to God's mission. You don't get to claim that I get to be this way. Someone said to me when I first started speaking, it was really funny actually. She came up to me and she said, I just want to help you. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, when you stand in front of an American audience, okay, immediately send the message that they can't relate to you. Okay, so I said to her, talk to me about that. Okay, and she said, because she said, your skirts are too long. Okay, and she literally started critiquing my fashion. And she was right, okay, because I looked like I was off the boat from China. And she said, when people look at you, they immediately think, what does she know about my life? How can she speak to me? Because I don't think she has any of my experiences. So she said, there's some things you're going to have to do to adapt because you want to be all things to all people. It's not about you. It's not about this is how I want it. It is about what do I have to change so that I don't block you from something more important. I think what Paul did was he served in his style. But when God brought him to a different context, what I saw was he was truly the bondservant of the Lord. And so what he did was he adapted it, okay? I had to change myself. See, I'm very goal-oriented. And someone said to me one day, she says, when I get an email from you, I feel like sometimes it's just all about what you want to get done, okay? And so she said, I don't feel loved. Now, this is what I do. I have to recognize my own style, where this is what I'm trying to get to, so this is what I need to ask you. So I'll write the email, but I don't send it, okay? And then I step back, and I come back in, and I create another paragraph before the email where I will stop and think about where is this person, and how do I speak encouragement into their lives? Because I don't want them, because that's not how I am. I'm not just about the task. I am about the task, but I'm also about you. But if I don't communicate in a way that you feel that, that's on me. Okay, so I will come back in, and then I will insert those, hey, how's your family doing? And I know you were going through this, just wondering if you need some prayer right now or some encouragement. And then, by the way, hey, we're having our conference, which would really appreciate you being an ambassador, and helping us, because we don't use our monies to pay for ads. And the reason we don't do that is because we want those funds to go back to the women. So if you could help us by just being that billboard for us, that would really help. But do you see that? You really you are in tune with your own leadership style. You surround yourself with what you need, but you also need to know you don't get to just say, well, this is how I am. Because if how you are is not encouraging the team, then you've got to change, okay? Because at the end of the day, I really believe this. Jesus came to lay down his life for the sheep, okay? When he came, he didn't say, well, I am Jesus, okay? Now, some leaders, when they step into a leadership role, it's all about their title, okay? And it's about them wanting authority. But you know what I see? I see that real leaders actually don't need a title. Okay? That's right. If you need a title for people to follow you, you're not a leader from the inside. You're a leader who wants to embellish yourself with a leadership title, but nobody's following you. Okay? And what I see Jesus do is he laid down his life for the sheep. Okay? In God's word, it said, God loved us first. Okay, he loved us first, and then he inspires us to love him back. I think as a leader, the most important thing is really to love your team. Okay, who are the sheep that God has given you? The craziest thing, I was reading this research. They say leaders sometimes blame the team. They'll say, I couldn't get to the goal because I didn't have the people with the right skill set. That is not what the research shows. The research shows that the greatest teams are not made up of people with the best skill sets. The greatest teams are made up by leaders who love their team, okay? And they loved each sheep individually in such a way that that person becomes more than they could ever imagine them being. Okay, so it is we're doing it together, but the sheep starts laying down their lives for the cause because the leader lays down her life or his life for the sheep. Do you get that? Okay, so I think that recognize your leadership style, but I actually think, but you submit your style under the authority of God and what he is doing. I think a third thing that's very important is to know that God is developing you as a leader too. Okay, so don't be stuck in, well, this is how God's always done it. Okay, because you have to be open to Okay, this is how God has always done it with me. But could he be working in me in a different way? Okay, so for instance, when God first called Moses and he was willing to raise up Aaron to go with him, the second time when Moses went back to God, he challenges God. He says, but you have not told me who you will send with me. What is Moses doing? He's going back to the first model. Well, this is how we've always done it, God. You know, you sent Aaron before, so who are you going to send next? Because until that happens, I'm not going. Okay, what is God's answer to him? God's answer to him was, my presence will go with you. Okay, God changed the model. God is saying to him, okay, maybe you had someone who went with you before, but this time you're going with me. Okay, this time I have raised you to a maturity where you don't need an Aaron anymore. Okay, and I think God reserves the right to do that with you. So when you get stuck in but I'm waiting for this to happen, I think you need to look in yourself and say, what could God be doing in me as he is growing me? My spiritual mom, God put her in my life at a time when I needed her voice in my life, because I think that I was a very hesitant leader. I didn't want to step into leadership, and I definitely did not want to do what God wanted to do through Inspire Women, because not everyone believes that women should be in leadership roles, and not everyone believes in investing in women. And there are very strong male figures in our city who truly don't believe in that. Okay, so I would get hate mail. I think that's really crazy for you to hear. I would get people calling me and saying that, you know, you are not doing God's work because you are leading the women to serve, and that's not their place. You know, their place is to be, I mean, there are people who believe that, okay? So I think that what's frightening to me was I grew up in a culture and in a society where women were not verbal, okay? So I don't have a role model of a woman who can speak out. So God was asking me to do something that was so contrary to everything I was. I was like, man, people have no idea how scared I am on the inside. Like, I have no role model. When people says to me things like, oh, you know, but your Heavenly Father loves you so much and so forth, it's so hard for me to tell them, but you don't understand. You grew up with a loving Father. Okay, you saw that. Yeah. I grew up with a father who was a rageaholic. I grew up with a father where if you say the wrong thing, you get hit across the face. Okay, so now I'm trying to believe that I have this Heavenly Father who loves me, when in reality, I've never seen it. I've not seen it in flesh form on this earth. Okay, for me to do some things, it's going to be a lot harder for someone else to do something. Now, what I found was, God said to me, I will not be held hostage to your emotional baggage. Okay? So it's like, you don't get to say, oh, God, but I can't do this because, you know, this is my background. This is why I can't do it. You know, and so she was a voice in my life because I needed a safe place to process and to be able to express my fears. And she came from a background where she watched, you know, her father abusing her mother. In fact, she said she stood between her father's belt and her mother to try to protect her. And so she knew what it was like. And she was the one who prayed me into leadership, really, because she would coach me and say, well, this is what you need to say. You need to go back again. I'll be like, oh my God, I'm not going to go back again. You know, they almost threw me out of their office the first time. No, you got to go back again. You need to be prayed up and you need to go back again. I mean, I was doing things that was so contrary to anything within me and my own emotional need. But I think she walked with me all those 14 years. And when she got ill, and we were talking about what if God was going to take her, I remembered saying to her that if God takes you, then I'm gone too. You know, it's like, oh, my season is over. You know, in fact, Charles Spurgeon, you know, in his testimony, he said he had a prayer warrior, and when that prayer warrior died, all the revival stopped. So I said, so it's biblical. If God takes you, then it must be my way also to say, my season's over. And she said to me, I will be so disappointed in you She said, for all that I have poured into you, it's not so that you would stop when I go, because she was older than me. She said, it's so that you could take all that's been poured into you and you would keep going. And I was actually surprised, because when God took her, what I found was he was working a different way, okay? Something has changed in your life, but your calling hasn't changed, because you are growing as a leader. And he's going to use you in a different way, and he's going to mature you in a different way. And I remember saying to her, but who's going to pray for me? Because you're like praying for me all the time. And she would say, you learn to pray for yourself, okay? There was no, she wasn't going to have some pity party with me. You know, she was like, you've got to be sure of your own calling. And she would always say to me, when things got tough, she would always say to me, did God release you? And I would say, no, he didn't. Then he said, well, you don't get to release yourself. It's that simple. You know, you don't get to design your own exit plan. We've had, you know, a lot of our supporters, they are older than me. So when we first started, they were like my pillar friends journeying with me. And then I see them struggling with different things. That's part of me feeling like, oh my God, it's like the pillars are falling. You know, how are we going to take the hill? All my generals are struggling. And in the midst of all this, I was writing radio segments. You know, it was crazy. I think I've written over 2,500 radio segments. Can you believe that? Because KHCB radio, they play them every day. All right, so to have it every day, you got to keep writing every day. And I tried to talk them into, can't you just replay, you know? And they said no. They do not want to replay anything. They want me to keep writing new things. But I remember writing this, and it really, this was one of my radio segments. I said, Peter, James, and John were the trio who served together. At the start of the church, Herod put James to death. The trio was no longer a trio. The Bible teaches us how Peter and John kept going. They did not let the enemy's strategy to strike at someone key in their lives to stop their momentum. Instead, they were vigilant and stayed focused. When a pillar falls, this is not the time to question your own calling, because if you are the last person standing, then you are the only one who can still stand in the battle. Okay? It was so funny. I was watching this movie. It was like one of the sequel to Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so he's trying to find the covenant or something. And so he finally found this secret chamber in the middle of this mountain. And he goes there, and there was this box, which was where the covenant was, or something's in it. And in front of it was a priest. And there was just one priest. And his hair was all white. It was like all the way to the ground. And so he says to the priest, who are you? And he says, I am the protector of the covenant. And he said, everyone else was killed, and I'm the only one left. And so I am here to protect the covenant. And it really spoke to my heart. I was like, when no one else is standing and you're the last man standing, you need to still keep standing, because you're the only one standing. I think that's very important in leadership. You need to settle what your calling is. And you also need to know that there are going to be different seasons in your life. That God may have brought you certain people in some season, and that he may be doing it a different way in another season, okay? I think what my spiritual mom did for me was she had to help me heal. Because if I'm not healed, I am a wounded leader, okay? And it's very hard for a wounded leader to lead, because you're going to be tripped up by a lot of your own emotional triggers. I think that she helped me get past those triggers, because she was a safe person where I could just be me. I didn't have to pretend I was okay when I was not okay. I could call her up and I would say, I'm so depressed. And then she would go, again? You know? And I said, yes, again. And I might call you tomorrow and still be depressed. And she would say, that's okay. We'll walk through this, you know? This must be stirring up a lot of your own memories that you haven't dealt with. Maybe there's some grieving you need to go through, or maybe there's some forgiveness you need to go through. And she kind of helped me through that. Okay, so I do feel that it's very important that you surround yourself with the right people. I think you need to be in tune with your leadership style. Okay, but then you also need to know that you don't get to demand your leadership style. You have to see, is my leadership style working with the sheep that God has called me to lead? Do they feel love? Because if they don't feel love, they're not going to want to take the hill, okay? Jesus had to first lay down his life, and then compelled by love, they then serve. That has to be our motto. And I think that a last thing I wanted to share with you is that you cannot let your emotional attachments drive your decisions. Okay, the mission has to be bigger than your emotional attachments. Let me give you some example. David knew that God had called him to be the future king. Okay, Samuel told him that. So when Jonathan came and said, Saul is out to kill you, he knew that as close as he was to Jonathan, he can't say, oh, well, I'm just going to give up the kingship. You know, I'm just going to tell Saul, you know, I don't want that, you know, because it's important for me to be here with my bestie. You know, I want to kind of hang out with Jonathan. He can't do that. He had to go. Okay, so then he had to go into hiding. He had the responsibility to preserve his life because God had a calling for him. Okay, you have a responsibility to take care of yourself. If you have health issues, you need to take care of that. Amen. If you have weight issues, you need to take care of that. Right. It is on you to be the vessel that God needs so that you can keep leading. Now, God's word says that when they parted, it says they wept, but David wept the more. Yeah. All right? There will be some people in your life that you have to leave. And it's going to hit you harder than it hits them. You know, and that's all part of the journey. That's all part of your sacrifice when you answered the call to lead in what God wants you to go. You have to settle that I might be more emotionally attached to you than you are to me. And I'm going to be crying about this breakup longer than you be crying about it. But I'm going to go anyway. Okay? Because saying goodbye is me stepping into my purpose. Amen. When David was, he was thrown off the throne by his son Absalom, and so his kingdom and the army went into battle with Absalom and his men. God's word tells us that David would ask, is my son Absalom safe? Okay? A couple of verses later, same question. Is my son Absalom safe? You can't deny the fact that you will be emotionally attached. It might be a biological son. It might be a spiritual son. It might be a daughter. Whatever it is, you can't deny what your heart is doing. But you don't make decisions based on what your heart is doing. You've got to let the mission now be the authority over you so that your heart serves under the mission. Okay, so when he found out the Absalom had died, he just cried out, oh, Absalom, Absalom. And he said, wish it were me instead of you. Okay, and what happened? Joab, the general, comes in and he reprimanded him. He said, how could you be wallowing here in grief when your men just went out there to fight for your kingdom? And he says, and if you do this, not one man will be here to serve under you anymore. He said, you need to go out there and you need to sit in your seat of leadership. And that's what David did. He got up and he went and he sat in his seat. You're going to find out that there will be situations in your life where your heart is broken. But guess what? You get to lead with a broken heart. Okay? You get to get up and you get to go. You have to lead even with a broken heart. That's right. I want to show you this picture I took. Tati would put it on the big screen. This is a picture I took from the balcony of my hotel. Okay, do you see that? Okay, this is Lake Austin. And in the middle of it, you see these two specks. They are two jet skis, okay? And guess what? Those two people on the jet skis, those are my two sons. Okay. And I don't know why on this morning there was nobody else on the lake. So you just see those two boys in the jet ski. And when I walked out from my balcony, I took that picture and God really spoke to my heart. And he said, your boys grew up. They were always together. It was them together against the world. And that's how you always envisioned it. It was like they'll always be close. They'll always be together. They're going to get married and buy houses next to each other. And the kids are going to grow up together. And you've got these dreams. You have these dreams for people close to you. Okay, then all of a sudden, they started revving up their engines. And they started taking off. And I saw one son took the jet ski. And he went all the way around the corner of that peninsula that was coming out. And the other son took the jet ski and went all the way the other way. And it was such a visual to me when God said, but in my plans, I may send them to the opposite ends of the world. Okay? And you're going to feel that emotional attachment of, but this is not how I dreamed it, God. Okay? But what you get to do is you get to let go of your dreams. You get to say, God, you're not here to serve my dreams. Okay? Yes, this may be something I had hoped for, but I'm going to trust you. And that for now, who knows if in the future he'll bring them back together. But for this season, he is choosing to develop them differently. You know, and we've got to trust it. God's mission has to be bigger than your emotional attachment. Because if you don't learn that, then what will happen is you're going to emotionally drain yourself. And you're going to be constantly recycling. And you can't move on with the mission that you're doing because you're so upset over certain situations in your life. You know, you've got to say, wow, this was a dream, okay? What do we do now, Lord? Because these details aren't lining up. And then you got to take, if there's something you can do, you do it. If there's nothing you can do, you just say, this is all I can do. You know, I can't be talking my other son into, I don't understand why you have to go serve in Japan. You know, it's like, what's wrong with Houston? You know, I don't get to do that because it's his process. Okay? He can't live off the fumes of my relationship with God. Amen. He's got to find his own. Okay? It's got to be his decision, his journey. And I've got to trust that God has a mission for me too. You know, and I don't get all entangled up in your head, in your mission. I'm not here to try to figure you out. You know, I'm here to try to encourage you and to give you testimony that I serve a God who is faithful. And the same God who is faithful to me, I am trusting will be faithful to you in your life. And then you let it go, okay? As a leader who can keep going, you've got to take your emotional attachments and they are surrendered to God's greater mission. So that's my message. I'm going to conclude by giving you, summarizing, and then I'll give you a story at the end. Okay. Leaders who keep going, they diffuse intense situations. Right? Jesus didn't go, oh my God, I'm going to Jerusalem. Okay? He doesn't add more fuel to an intense situation. He doesn't escalate them. He doesn't waste energy being resentful. Leaders who keep going, they have already settled that they will give their lives away in service. Okay? You've got to settle the cost of leadership. You got to be in tune to your own leadership style and how it fits God's mission, and surround yourself with people who will complement you. But at the same time, you don't get to worship your leadership style. Okay, you get to change it and adapt it so that the people you are leading will feel loved by you. You have to be in tune to your own maturity and flow with how God may be working differently in your life. Just because that's how he did it before doesn't mean that's how he will do it again. I'll hear people say to me, well, that's how God's always led me. Well, guess what? He may choose to lead you in a different way. Okay, so you don't get to confine God and how he wants to work in your life. And let God's mission be bigger than your emotional attachments. I'm going to conclude by showing you this video, and it's really funny because I'm actually working with a dog. And that's another question they asked me for the Houston Women magazine, which was funny, like, what do you do in your spare time? And I said, well, I'm training a dog to be a ministry dog. I don't think she expected that answer. And then she goes, what is that, you know? And I said that I was befriended the founder of a ministry called Kingdom Dogs. And he uses dogs to illustrate the Bible message. So for instance, he said he will put the dog all the way at the end of the auditorium, and he'll be on the stage, and he will call the dog, and he'll tell the audience, as my dog comes to the stage, I want you to throw him a treat. I want you to wave at him. I want you to try to distract him. And he says, and what you will find is he will ignore all of you, and he will go right past all of you, and he will come to the stage. And he said, and I use that to illustrate the message. My sheep knows my voice. Okay, and he says, and in life, that's what you need to settle. Is this the master's voice? Because if it's not the master's voice, I'm not going to follow. Okay, now this dog is far from that, okay? Because in here, she is, what, 3 months old? Oh, he's going to be big. He's going to be about 80 pounds. But right now, he's only 3 months old. And the first lesson he said is that this is so interesting because he said it's biblical too. Because the first lesson is you've got to learn to sit, okay? Because if you don't learn to sit and to focus on the master's voice, then when you're out and all these situations are changing, you haven't learned the fundamentals. Okay, what does God say about us sitting in his presence? You've got to learn to sit so that you now stay focused. You hear. So this is the dog who's sitting, and what I will show you is I thought he was sitting fine. And the trainer comes up and looks at him and he goes, no, he's sitting his way, okay? But he's not sitting in the way when the dog sits when he is submissive. He said he is a little too relaxed in his sitting. He's sitting with his leg out, okay? He said that is not sitting. That is you sitting on the outside, but you're standing on the inside. So he says, so I don't pat him on the head and say good boy until he sits in a way that is submissive to me. So I want him to straighten out his leg and sit, okay? And even then he says, I'm still waiting for something else. And I said, what are you waiting for? He says, when the dog sits and he looks that way, he's trying to avoid you, okay? He said, but when the dog sits and he's submissive, he'll look at you, okay? And I thought it was such a good lesson. But this is just a very short video, and you see him sitting sloppily until the trainer is trying to teach him to sit straight. And then he wound the leash around his face because he's trying to keep him focused on, now I got something on my face as compared to looking around. So I want you to see this. I think it's pretty cute.
That's a lazy sit. He throws his hips out and sits sideways. This is him doing it his way, inside of my boundaries. What do? Come on. I grab the leash. Here, sit. I pull him in a forward motion and immediately sit. He never gains any ground, but he fixes a square sit. I put the leash on his face only because I want him to focus on something else besides sitting back where he was again. It's kind of like watch the ball while I take your wallet, right? Good. Sit. Would you agree that the training works?
Did you see that? Okay, and he always is waiting for, when the dog is sitting and he's walking around, what he's looking for is the dog's eyes following him, okay? Or is he distracted? So I don't have the video with me today, but another thing he did was, as he escalates in the training, The dog is sitting, and he takes a plastic water bottle and he throws it on the ground in front of him. And then he throws a stick in front of him. And then he throws a treat in front of him. And he says, and the dog is sitting. Okay? It all begins with sitting. Are you sitting in the presence of the Lord, where you're not going to let anything else distract you? Okay? And are you leading where you can look into the Master's eyes? You're not looking away. You're not turning away, because you can look straight in the Master's eyes and you can lead with conviction that you're doing exactly what He called you to do. And that is my lesson for you today.